Barack Obama has faced criticism, disrespect, and lies before. But this time, when Trump tried to humiliate him on live television, Obama's response reminded the world why real power doesn't shout. It speaks with wisdom. The night was electric. The air inside the studio felt heavy with curiosity, the kind that sits on people's shoulders when they know something big is about to happen. The audience had been waiting for weeks for this moment. A live discussion between two men who could not be more different, yet forever tied together by history. Barack Obama sat quietly on one side of the stage, calm and composed, that familiar half-smile resting on his face. His posture said everything, relaxed but ready. Across from him, Donald Trump adjusted his tie, his expression sharp and confident, his presence loud even before he spoke. Every flick of his hand, every glance toward the audience seemed designed to remind everyone who was in charge, or at least who thought he was. The cameras panned across the room, catching faces in the audience, some excited, some tense, others simply curious about what would unfold. There was no mistaking the sense of anticipation. People weren't just here for answers. They were here to witness something. The host welcomed everyone with a steady voice that tried to cut through the tension. "Tonight," he said, "we bring together two of the most influential leaders of our time. We're here to talk about the challenges facing America, the economy, jobs, and the future we all share." His words sounded routine, but there was nothing routine about this night. It wasn't just another political event. This was personal. These two men carried years of rivalry, public clashes, and sharp remarks that had never truly been resolved. And now they sat only a few feet apart, each knowing that one wrong sentence could ignite the room. Trump's expression softened into a smile as the applause echoed. He seemed at ease and like a man walking into a game he already believed he had won. Obama, on the other hand, stayed still. His eyes scanned the room, studying the crowd, almost as if he were reading the energy of every person watching. When the noise settled, the host turned to Trump first. "Mr. President," he began, "what do you see as the biggest issues Americans are facing right now?" Trump didn't hesitate. His words came fast, filled with confidence and certainty. "Well," he said, "we're dealing with the worst mess any administration has ever inherited. The economy was broken, jobs were shipped overseas, our people were forgotten. We're finally fixing what the former presidents left behind." The word "former" hung in the air. The audience stirred, and some clapping, others whispering. He hadn't named Obama, but no one needed him to. Everyone knew who he meant. Obama kept his calm expression, though a small flicker of something passed through his eyes, a quiet awareness that the first punch had been thrown. Trump kept going. "We're doing things that should have been done years ago," he said. "We're bringing strength back. We're bringing pride back. The last administration talked a lot, but they didn't do much." Some people laughed softly. Others looked uncomfortable. The tension was building inch by inch like a storm rolling over a quiet horizon. Obama remained still. Not a word. Not a shake of the head. Just that calm, steady gaze that somehow made the silence louder than any shout could. The host, sensing the moment, turned toward Obama. "Mr. Obama," he said gently, "would you like to respond?" Obama nodded once, slow and deliberate. He leaned toward the microphone and began to speak, his voice smooth, low, but firm. "Well," he said, "I think we can all agree this country has faced tough times before. And every president, myself included, has had to make hard choices." The room quieted immediately. His voice didn't need to rise. It carried weight in its calmness. "Right now," he continued, "families across America are feeling the squeeze. At the gas pump, at the grocery store, when they look at their rent or their mortgage. These are real struggles, but blaming each other doesn't fix them. Working together does." The audience started nodding. His tone wasn't defensive, it was grounded, real. For a moment, the room seemed to exhale, but Trump wasn't the kind to stay silent for long. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "That's a nice speech," he said, "but we both know speeches don't pay the bills." The audience gasped, a mix of amusement and disbelief. Obama smiled faintly. The host tried to move the conversation forward, but everyone could feel what was happening. This wasn't going to be a polite exchange of ideas. This was going to be something else entirely. A clash of egos, histories, and words sharp enough to draw blood. Even before the first major argument began, people could sense the shift. The energy in the studio wasn't just tense anymore. It was charged, humming, waiting. Trump looked satisfied, thinking he'd set the tone for the night. Obama stayed quiet, eyes fixed on him, almost like he was studying a chessboard, seeing 10 moves ahead. In that moment, it became clear to everyone watching, this wasn't going to be about who could shout louder. It was going to be about who could outlast the other. And as the audience leaned in, hanging on every pause and every breath, they knew one thing for sure. This night would not end quietly. Trump leaned forward slightly, both elbows resting on the table in front of him, and the room seemed to tilt toward him. Every camera lens pointed his way, every eye fixed on the man who never missed a chance to own the spotlight. He cleared his throat and gave the crowd that familiar half-smile, the one that said, "Watch this." "Look," he began, his voice confident, almost teasing. "Everyone in this room knows what's really going on. The country's facing problems and big problems, but they didn't start with me." He paused just long enough to let the silence work for him. "They started with the people who came before me. People who made weak deals bad deals. People who cared more about speeches than results." The air seemed to tighten. He didn't need to say Obama's name. The audience filled in the blanks. Trump kept going, his words rolling out faster now, louder, building rhythm like a performer who had found his groove. "We had 8 years of talks, 8 long years, about hope and change. Well, I've seen what that hope and change did. It gave us record debt, weak borders, and jobs that vanished overseas." A few cheers came from one side of the audience. On the other, murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. The split was clear, the kind of division that had followed Trump wherever he went. But he fed on it. "You know," he continued, leaning even closer to the mic, "I had to rebuild this country with my own hands. They said it couldn't be done, that I was all talk. But look around, we're fixing things. We're bringing pride back." He listed a few numbers, a few achievements, but his tone carried more than his facts did. His words were sharp, shaped to cut. Every sentence felt like a jab aimed directly across the stage. Obama sat still, eyes calm, fingers lightly touching the edge of the desk in front of him. Trump noticed, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Some presidents," he said, "they like to talk about being inspirational. They gave nice speeches, beautiful speeches. But speeches don't put food on the table. Results do. That's what I give the American people. Results." He paused for a moment, letting the echo of his voice settle over the crowd. The applause came, scattered but loud enough to fuel him. "You see," he said, when I came into office, everything was broken. The economy was crawling, the housing market was a disaster. Our military was weak and other countries were laughing at us. I had to fix all that. And we did. We're stronger now than we've been in years." The host nodded politely, trying to keep the balance. "Mr. President," he said carefully, "some people would argue those issues were part of a global trend that—" But Trump interrupted before he could finish. No, let's not make excuses. We know who was in charge back then. We know who made those decisions." The audience gasped softly. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Everyone knew what was coming next. Trump turned his head toward Obama, his smile still there but colder now. "Barack," he said, drawing out the name, "you left me quite a mess to clean up." A quiet wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Obama didn't move, didn't blink. His face remained perfectly still. Trump chuckled softly. "You know, people forget. They think the past was perfect. It wasn't, it was chaos, and we had to rebuild from the ground up." He adjusted his cufflinks, glancing toward the cameras. "I just think people should remember that. Remember who created the problem before they start pointing fingers at the solution." The audience wasn't sure whether to clap or stay silent. The host gave a quick nod, sensing the tension stretching to its limit. "Thank you, Mr. President," he said, turning quickly to Obama. "Mr. Obama, how do you respond to that?" Obama smiled slightly, a polite, almost amused expression, but his eyes held something deeper. Quiet calculation. He took a breath, slow and steady, but before he could speak, Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing that grin that always seemed to say your move. For a few seconds, the silence in the room felt like thunder. The audience could feel the clash coming. Two men, one built on volume, the other on control, facing off in a battle of words that would test both their tempers and their patience. And as that silence stretched, It felt like the entire nation was holding its breath, waiting to see which one would blink first. Trump finally broke it with a laugh, tilting his head slightly. "Go ahead," he said. "Let's hear another one of those famous speeches." The tone was mocking, casual on the surface but laced with challenge. Obama raised his eyes, and for the first time that night, the calm expression gave way to something sharper. Focus. Trump had drawn first blood. He thought he'd won the first round. But as the audience watched Obama straighten his shoulders and lean toward the microphone, they could feel the change in the air. Something was about to shift. The man who had been quiet for the last 10 minutes was about to speak. And when he did, everyone knew, the entire room would feel it. The tension wasn't just in the words anymore. It was in the stillness, in the way both men seemed to prepare for the next strike. And though Trump smiled proudly, convinced that he had landed the heavier blow, a few people in the front row could see something in Obama's eyes. That calm before the storm that comes when a man knows exactly what to say next. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be polite. It wasn't going to be careful. It was going to be sharp, personal, and unforgettable. The room was ready, the cameras still rolling, as Obama finally opened his mouth to speak. Obama had just started speaking, calm, thoughtful, and measured. His voice carried the steady rhythm of reason, a tone that drew people in rather than pushed them away.
He began by acknowledging the struggles that millions of Americans faced: rising prices, rent that seemed impossible to afford, jobs that no longer felt secure.
His words painted a picture that felt real, something people could see in their own lives. "This isn't about politics," Obama said, his tone even. "It's about families trying to make ends meet, about parents choosing between bills and groceries, about young people wondering if the dream they were promised still exists." The crowd listened quietly, drawn to the honesty in his voice. For a moment, it felt like the tension had eased, but that moment didn't last. Trump, who had been leaning back in his chair with a look of boredom, suddenly leaned forward. He gave a little laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be friendly. "You know," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "it's funny to hear you talk about America's problems like you're one of us." The words hung in the air. Obama paused. Trump continued, his tone growing sharper, each word cutting a little deeper. "Because let's be honest, Valer, there are some people in this country who never really felt American, right? Some who came from, well, who knows where." The audience gasped softly, recognizing the familiar insinuation. It wasn't new, but it was cruel every time. Trump had gone back to that old wound, the one about Obama's birthplace, his identity, the whisper campaign that had haunted his presidency years before. Obama didn't move at first. His face stayed composed, but the stillness in his eyes said everything. The insult wasn't just political, it was personal, Trump smirked, sensing the discomfort ripple through the room. "You know, maybe that's part of the problem," he added, as if just thinking out loud. "Maybe some people who don't understand what it means to be truly American shouldn't be telling Americans how to live." That line hit hard. The audience murmured again, louder this time, uneasy and restless. The host tried to interject, but Trump waved him off. "I'm just saying," Trump went on, his tone almost playful now, "if people love other countries so much, maybe they should go back there. Wouldn't that make everyone happier?" It was a direct blow, and everyone knew exactly who it was aimed at. Obama took a slow breath, his expression still calm. But the calm now felt different. It wasn't stillness from restraint, it was the calm before something sharper, something earned through years of having to rise above. He finally spoke, his voice low but clear enough to cut through the noise. "You know, Donald," he said, "there are moments when silence says more than shouting ever could. But this isn't one of those moments." The audience fell silent again. Obama leaned forward, his tone steady. "When you start telling people they don't belong, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting every American who's ever been told they're not enough because of how they look, where they were born, or what they believe." The words landed hard, not loud, but powerful. Trump's smile faltered for the briefest moment, but he quickly recovered. Obama continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "This country isn't built on one story, Donald. It's built on millions, and every one of them matters." A few quiet claps started in the crowd, not a cheer but a sign of respect. Trump chuckled again, but it didn't have the same confidence now. "You're good at speeches," he said, shaking his head. "Always have been. But speeches don't solve anything. They just make people feel better for a few minutes." Obama smiled slightly. "Sometimes," he replied, "making people feel seen is the first step to solving something." The crowd responded to that one, louder this time. Trump's jaw tightened. He looked for a new angle, something to shift attention back his way. "You talk about unity," Trump said, his voice rising. "But you divided this country before I ever showed up. Don't act like you're some hero of togetherness." Obama didn't flinch. "Division doesn't come from who speaks loudest," he said. "It comes from those who build walls, real or imagined, just to feel taller." That line hit like a thunderclap. Even those who came to support Trump couldn't help but feel the weight of it. Trump's face reddened slightly. He gave a forced smile, but his tone turned sharper. "You know what? Maybe if we stopped letting everyone in, stopped pretending we can save the world, we wouldn't be in this mess. Maybe some people just don't belong here." The audience gasped again. For a moment, time froze. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. It wasn't just an insult anymore, and it was something uglier. Something deeper. Obama looked directly at Trump, his voice now firm, quiet, and cutting. "That's the difference between you and me," he said. "You talk about belonging like it's something you get to decide. I see it as something we share, or we lose together." The words hit with the weight of truth. Trump said nothing this time. His smile had vanished. The audience sat still, stunned by the exchange. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't chaos, it was colder than that. It was a clash of values right in front of their eyes. Obama leaned back slightly, his voice calm again. "You can keep saying people like me don't belong. But here's the thing. I'm not the one trying to walk away from America when it doesn't agree with me. I'm the one trying to make it better." That line drew a quiet roar of applause, not wild, but heavy with emotion. Trump looked toward the cameras, but for the first time, his confidence seemed to waver. He had meant to humiliate Obama, but somehow, he'd just given him the stage. The moment lingered, a cold, unforgettable reminder that words can wound, but grace can strike harder. And though Trump didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of the storm Obama was about to unleash. The crowd was still buzzing from Trump's last remark, but Obama remained composed, too composed. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his silence carried the kind of weight that makes everyone nervous. It wasn't the quiet of defeat. It was the quiet of someone waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, in a tone so even it cut through the noise, Obama began. "You know, Donald," he said, "you've spent a lot of time talking about who belongs in this country and who doesn't. But maybe it's time we talk about something else. Something more personal." Trump shifted slightly in his chair. The crowd sensed the change in energy. Obama wasn't raising his voice, but something about his tone made everyone lean in closer. "When people look up to leaders," Obama continued, "they expect us to lead not just with power, but with respect, for others, for ourselves, for our families. Because leadership without respect isn't strength. It's just noise." The words hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Trump gave a half smile, but it looked forced. "Nice words," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "You always did know how to sound good, but that doesn't change facts." Obama nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "Facts matter. So let's talk about one." There was a pause, the kind that felt like a held breath. Obama leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on Trump. "I've heard you talk a lot about family values, about protecting the American family," Obama said. "And yet I remember you once said something about your own daughter that didn't sound much like protection to me." The audience froze. Trump blinked, caught off guard. Obama's voice remained calm. "You remember, right? You said, if Ivanka weren't my daughter, maybe I'd be dating her." A wave of uneasy laughter spread through the audience. Not because it was funny, but because it was uncomfortable. Everyone remembered that quote, but no one expected it to be brought up here, in front of millions. Trump let out a short, sharp laugh, trying to play it off. "Oh, come on," he said, waving a hand. "That was a joke. Everyone knows it." Obama's eyes didn't move. "Maybe," he said. "But what kind of joke makes people question a father's boundaries with his own child?" The laughter stopped. The room went silent again. Trump's jaw tightened. "You're twisting things, Barack. You always twist things. Obama shook his head slightly. No, I'm just repeating what you said. The difference is, I understand how words can shape the way people see you. When you speak as a leader, you teach people what's acceptable, and when you treat your own daughter like a punchline, you teach something dangerous. Trump looked around, clearly irritated now. You think you can sit there and judge me? You of all people? Obama smiled faintly, but it wasn't a warm smile. I'm not judging you, Donald. I'm reminding you and everyone watching that words have weight, and some words never go away. The audience was completely still. Even the cameras seemed to linger longer on every expression. Obama leaned back slightly, his tone soft but cutting. See? You spend so much time attacking others, trying to tear down anyone who disagrees with you. But when someone asks you a simple question about your own actions, suddenly it's all jokes and excuses. Trump's face reddened. You know what? Maybe you should worry less about me and more about your own family. There are rumors, I've heard things about your background, about... Obama interrupted gently, his voice quiet but firm. Careful, Donald. You've gone down that road before and it didn't end well for you. The crowd murmured in agreement, remembering the years Trump had spent questioning Obama's citizenship. Obama straightened his posture, his voice now steady as stone. You see, the difference between us is simple. I've made mistakes, every leader has, but I've never used my platform to divide people. I've never turned my own children into punchlines. I've never insulted the country that gave me everything. Trump looked visibly angry now. You think you're perfect, don't you? He snapped. Obama shook his head. No, Donald. I just think leadership is about something more than winning. It's about showing people what dignity looks like, even when you're under attack. The crowd erupted in applause. Not wild cheering, but a slow rolling wave that filled the room with energy. Obama waited for it to fade before adding, and since you brought up families, let me ask you something, Donald. Something you've never really answered. Trump narrowed his eyes. What's that? Obama's voice lowered, every word deliberate. Who is Barron's biological mother? The room fell silent. You could feel the tension ripple like a current. Trump froze for a split second, his expression tightening. Then, with forced laughter, he shook his head. That's ridiculous, he said quickly. You're going too far now. Obama didn't respond. He simply looked at him, steady, calm, waiting. Trump avoided eye contact. This is pathetic, he muttered. Typical media setup. Obama leaned forward slightly. No media, Donald. Just a question. You asked me where I was born once. I'm just returning the favor. The audience gasped. Trump's face turned crimson. For a long moment, no one spoke. The cameras zoomed in on both men, one silent and composed, the other visibly rattled. Trump finally stood up, trying to regain control. I'm not doing this, he said sharply. I don't have to sit here and take these kinds of questions. I've got more important things to do. Obama gave a small nod. That's up to you, he said quietly. But walking away doesn't change what was said, or what people saw. Trump turned to leave, muttering about an important call, his expression tight with anger. The host tried to calm things down, but it was too late. The moment had already burned itself into everyone's mind. Obama stayed seated, his gaze steady as the audience buzzed with disbelief. He had taken every insult, every provocation, and then with the precision of a blade, he turned it all back. Trump had walked into the show thinking he'd control the spotlight, but by the time he left, it was clear. Obama hadn't just defended himself. He had defined the night. The room stayed quiet long after Trump had walked out. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed like the end of a storm, sudden, heavy, and strange. The host shifted nervously in his chair, glancing toward the cameras, unsure of whether to continue. The crowd whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed, and there sat Barack Obama, calm, composed, still in his seat. His expression hadn't changed much, but there was something in his eyes now. A look of quiet reflection. The kind that comes after a long fight when you realize the crowd has stopped cheering and started listening. He waited a few seconds before speaking, his voice steady, almost gentle. Well, he said with a faint smile, that was something. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, nervous but relieving. It broke the tension that had hung in the air like a heavy curtain. Obama glanced toward the empty seat Trump had left behind. You know, he said, when people walk away from a conversation, it usually means they've run out of answers. Or maybe they never came with any. The laughter grew a little louder this time, but Obama wasn't smiling now. His tone shifted, deeper, more serious. But this isn't about me or him. It's about us. About what kind of country we want to be. He leaned forward slightly, speaking not to the host, not to the cameras, but to the people watching at home, to the single mother counting bills, the worker with a double shift, the student wondering how they'll afford rent next month. I know life feels heavy right now, he said softly. Prices are up. Jobs don't feel safe. People are worried about their kids' futures. I hear it every day, but the answer isn't anger. It isn't about blaming someone who looks different or came from somewhere else. The crowd listened quietly, hanging on each word. The truth is, Obama continued, we've always been strongest when we face problems together. When we didn't look for someone to push down but someone to pull up. That's what built this country in the first place. He paused, his eyes thoughtful. The sad part, he said, is that too many leaders forget that. They think leadership is about shouting louder or making someone else the enemy. But that's not leadership. That's fear. His voice grew stronger, steadier. Real leadership is about responsibility, about standing there when it's hard, when people disagree with you, when you're tested. It's about telling people the truth even when it's not what they want to hear. The audience clapped softly, not out of excitement but respect. Obama looked toward the crowd, his tone turning more personal. You saw what happened tonight. Words were said, lines were crossed. And maybe some people are wondering what the point of all that was. He took a small breath, then said, the point is simple. Character still matters. How we treat each other still matters. The world may have changed, but those things haven't. He let the silence stretch for a few seconds before continuing. You can't lead a country you don't love, and you can't love a country if you only love part of it. That line hit the audience like a heartbeat. You could feel it settle, one quiet nod at a time. Obama straightened a little, his voice soft again. So tonight I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to think. To look at the people around you, your neighbors, your co-workers, the strangers you pass every day, and remember that they're part of the same story you're in. Whether they agree with you or not, he smiled gently, because the truth is, America isn't just one person sitting behind a desk. It's not a slogan or a campaign. It's all of us. Every single one of us trying, sometimes failing, but still trying to do better. The audience broke into applause, louder now, fuller, carrying both relief and admiration. But Obama wasn't finished. He looked straight into the main camera, his eyes calm but firm. We can't afford to give up on each other. Not now, not ever. The moment we do, we lose what makes us who we are. He paused for just a heartbeat, then added, so wherever you are, whether you agreed with me or not tonight, I hope you'll take a moment to think about what kind of world you want to leave behind. Because if we want better leaders, we have to be better people. The audience stood, clapping, not in wild excitement, but in quiet acknowledgement. Some people even had tears in their eyes, not from sadness, but from a strange sense of recognition. Obama nodded to the host, then to the crowd. Thank you, he said simply. And remember, real change doesn't start in Washington. It starts in your home, your neighborhood, your heart. The applause swelled again. The camera slowly zoomed out, capturing the empty chair beside him. Trump's chair, still turned slightly away from the table. A silent reminder of how the night had unfolded. The host thanked everyone, his voice still shaky from the intensity of the exchange, but the focus stayed on Obama. He stood up finally, giving one last wave to the crowd. As he turned to leave, the lights dimmed slightly, and the audience continued clapping, not for the spectacle they had witnessed, but for the message that lingered after it. That leadership isn't about winning the argument, but about standing tall when it counts. And as the camera stopped rolling, the world had already begun talking, not about who insulted who, but about how one man turned humiliation into a masterclass in dignity. That night, Obama didn't just end a debate. He reminded everyone watching what leadership is supposed to look like. Calm in chaos, steady in the storm, and unshaken by noise.